Okay, so I am looking at the poll now, and tell you what, I'm going to end the polling, and if I can share the results, so you can see them if you're interested. Just to let you know, it looks like about 11 of you have not attended Gale Digital Scholar Lab training before, and 6 of you have. So we've got more that haven't than have. The majority of you are library staff, but we have a few students here, teaching staff, and 1 researcher. And in terms of the confidence with digital humanities techniques or research or vocabulary, we're looking around about, sort of a somewhat confident or a little confident, with a few of you as outliers on not confident at all or very confident. So that is absolutely fine. We have a great range of people here, great range of perspectives. That is all fantastic. And as you're going to see, with this session. Obviously, we've got about an hour and a half today, and I've got quite a bit to go through, but it's sort of a bit more. It's a little bit more, a little bit less regimented than a kind of introductory session that I would normally do, where I kind of have to introduce the lab to you and take you through some of the workflow and show you bits of that. Here, we're going to maybe have a chance to discuss things a little bit more. Certainly, you'll have a chance to ask questions as we go. In terms of questions, obviously, there's sort of 23 of you here. I want to make sure that everybody has the chance to ask a question and to understand as we go. The chat is probably the best way to go about that. Obviously, there's quite a few of you here, and I want to make sure that everybody kind of has a chance to speak. So the chat is a great place to go. If you pop questions in there as you go, or ask questions, anything that comes into your mind, Monique will be having a look at the chat. And if there's anything that's sort of really important or crops up that she thinks needs to be answered straight away, she'll interrupt me, and then I'll answer the question. I will make sure as we go through that I stop at various points and ask you guys if you have any questions at all, and give you guys a chance to speak as well. I'd also, as we get into the tools themselves, you're going to see we're going to start sort of fairly broad, and we're going to start with an introduction, a sort of slight refresher on the lab, and then we're going to look at the tools in kind of theory. And then we're going to start kind of having a look at the tools in practice. So I want to get into the lab as soon as possible and start looking at the tools, what you can do, and sort of show you some use cases of them. As we're doing that, I think there'll be more than enough opportunity to kind of ask questions and indeed put your own perspectives across. If anybody, those of you who've kind of said that you are very confident with digital humanities, whether that means that you've got experience of kind of creating your own research or indeed creating your own tools, it'd be interesting to know your experience and to be able to sort of share that with your colleagues. So with all of that said, that's where we are, and that's what we'll be doing for the next about 80 minutes now. Right, so here is my list of a few things that we're going to be talking about today. I've done this in the wrong order. There we go. I always get my animation wrong. So we're going to start off with having a look at a few examples of the tools in action. So really having a look at it from a live perspective. I really want to get an idea of how you might use these analyses in your projects. I know that the majority of you are from the library, but obviously we have a kind of, adding everybody out, actually probably a majority from outside of the library, so people who might be interested in using this kind of thing for research. So I want to think about how you might use these tools, these techniques, this workflow in your project, in your teaching, in your research, to kind of add value to it. And obviously for the library, it's really important not only for your own research but for supporting other research as well. How certain use cases and ways in which we might think about using these analyses in a practical way. The last bit I think is important as well. I'm going to talk about, I suppose I called it the exploratory or experimental nature of DH. Iterative is another way of thinking about it. An idea that it probably is much closer to kind of the scientific method than anything else. The idea of experimenting, of coming in with a thesis or a theory, and working to try and prove that by kind of running running experiments over it and changing variables every time. So we're going to think about that a little bit as well. Okay, so for those of you who've never been to a lab training before, there's a whole kind of introductory sort of training, and we've done training with Tel Aviv before, and I think it's probably recorded. So I would definitely get in touch with More Cohen or anyone in your library. There should be a recording of it somewhere, or if not, get in touch with me and I can share it with you. But I want to start off with really what the lab is, what we're looking at today. Well, this, broadly speaking, is what the lab is. It's an online cloud-hosted text and data mining research environment. I've got a whole kind of spiel about how we came, Gale, to develop a product like this. It's quite new for us. Historically, we are creators of historical digital archive products. So, like I said at the beginning, something like the Times Digital Archive, an archive of one newspaper, the Times in this case, going back to the very first issue of it from the 1st of January 1785 all the way up to 2015, and giving you every issue of that newspaper and giving you the ability to search and make discoveries within it. Okay, that's kind of what we've been doing for about the last 20 years. So it's either individual collections like the Times, or it's big multi-publication or multi-source collections like Echo. Echo, if you've not heard of it, as I said, stands for 18th Century Collections Online, and is essentially every significant book written in English in the 18th century. It's everything. Okay, Tel Aviv has had bits of Echo for quite a long time, and that's because if you're studying the 18th century, it's incredibly important to have a collection of essentially all the significant books written in a language. When it was published in 2003, when we created it, it was the largest digitization project of its time. It's about 33 million pages and 180,000 books. So there's those two, and there's a lot more as well. And as I said, Tel Aviv has been investing in these things for a long time, and we've been given you the ability to kind of search across all of them and that sort of thing. But since about 2018, we've given you this as well. So the Gale Digital Scholar Lab is a piece of software, is an environment in which you can search through most of your Gale primary source collections. So it says here, access to a broad range of texts from Gale primary source collections. So this is your Gale primary source collections. We're not showing you things to which you don't have access. It is only the things to which you have access and that the library has bought. But for the first time, you've got those collections allied to powerful text mining tools. So in the same environment, you've got the content and the tools, both of them optimized to work together. And hopefully you're going to see some of the benefits of that. From those sets and from those collections, you have the ability, so every researcher in Tel Aviv has the ability, or every member of Tel Aviv, I should say, every student, everyone, has the ability to construct custom content sets across your Gale collections. And what I mean by that is essentially it doesn't matter what you bring together. You can bring together a 17th century book, an 18th century newspaper, a 19th century manuscript, a 20th century playbill, and you can bring them together and you can analyze them, and you can do it in about 5 minutes. I don't know why you ever would, but you absolutely can if you want to. There's a lot in there about organizing and managing your research. So for those of you who are very, very confident with digital humanities, or indeed those of you who are researchers or students and you are wanting to do your own research within here, you've got a lot in here that helps you to organize and manage your research as well. For those of you who are new to digital humanities, or indeed for those of you who are wanting to teach parts of digital humanities or all of digital humanities, or aspects within a traditional kind of humanities course, there is a lot of integrated help and instructional materials through a thing called the Learning Center. I'll point that out to you. I won't go into it in much depth, but I'll point it out because after this session is done and you're kind of thinking, right, I need to go into the lab and I need to kind of go and have a play around. The Learning Center is absolutely the best place I can send you. It is perfect. It's written by DH academics, some that we have on staff. It's created by an instructional designer, again, one that we have on staff. So it's created on kind of pedagogical principles. But yeah, all the material in it is created by people with you know, with PhDs who teach digital humanities. And then for those of you, again, who are kind of who are experts in this or looking to become experts, one of the key things about digital humanities is openness and sharing. Now, we can never get around the fact that there's a paywall with Gale. You know, you pay for our content. That just is what it is. But we try and be as open as we can with the lab. So we give you the ability to export the OCR, and I'll talk about what OCR is in a second, the statistical data and the visualizations in standard formats. Okay, and I'll explain all of that and where all that comes in as we go. But this slide is usually the culmination of about 40 minutes of me talking. So in an introductory session. So hopefully that kind of gives you an introduction to what the lab actually is. And this allows me to go further and more in depth on the lab, because this is the lab workflow. And the bit that I want you to focus on, first of all, is the light blue in the middle. So where it says build, clean, analyze, this is the workflow in broad terms for the lab. And you're going to see that when we go and look at the lab, you're going to see it laid out in black and white. Okay, so these are the steps that you would go to, broadly speaking, to run a project. And as you go underneath those, you can see that you've got the various kind of technical steps, or the steps within the product that you would go to and that you would do in order to do certain things. So under build, you might think you start off with the advanced search, which allows you to refine the attributes. You would then go to the results page to evaluate the results, and finally maybe to the document explorer to examine the OCR. Okay, and then that might then lead you on to cleaning the data. So you might use the cleaning tool to configure your cleaning attributes and clean your OCR data. Okay, the first thing to say is that this is a linear process. I mean, there's no getting around it. You know, if you're coming into the lab from the start, you would generally speaking go build, clean, analyze, but you don't have to. I want you to think of it more as an iterative process. So this is where it comes back, this idea of projects within digital humanities, almost like a sort of science experiment, as something that that you experiment and that you learn as you go, and then the learnings that you take, you apply them back earlier in the process. So you can see that all the arrows that I've got in here, so all the sort of orange arrows are all double-ended. So what I mean by that is that you can go back at any time and from any place. So it is entirely consistent that you might, build your content set and then start cleaning your content set. And as you clean your content set, it tells you about what your data is. It maybe highlights a few things. It shows you that actually some of the data that you've got is wrong and you don't want that. So you go back to your build again and you take out that wrong data and maybe you add in some more data. And then of course you built up your content set, and then maybe you go straight to analyze from there. And as you analyze it again, that teaches you about what your content set is. It shows you a little bit about your content set, and you maybe think, right, okay, I'll go back again and refine my cleaning tool, or I'll refine my build, or whatever. So, think of this as an iterative process. And this is how digital humanities projects work. For those of you who sort of said you were confident in digital humanities projects, I would fully expect, if we sat down and talked about it, that this is the kind of process that you might have to go through for writing your own software and for running your own analyses and creating your own content sets. It's just, hopefully, outside of the lab, that kind of thing takes a lot more time than inside of the lab. What the lab is hopefully doing for you is speeding up a lot of these processes, so that even if you are an absolutely 100% confident and expert in digital humanities, there are some things in here that will allow you to kind of radically speed up some processes, whether that's build or clean, to be able to save yourself some time. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, you can see that at every stage, you have the ability to export data and to use it outside of the lab. And, again, this is probably more relevant to those of you more confident in digital humanities. But what I'm saying is at every stage, you have the ability to just take stuff out of the lab and do what you want with it. Okay, so, let's say, for example, that you are one of those people who are creating your own algorithms, writing your own software. Essentially, you could, if you wanted to, just use the lab as a way of radically speeding up the time it takes to build a content set, to bring a content set together, to curate it, and then to kind of clean it. And then once you've got that cleaned, curated set of data, you just take it outside of the lab, export it all, and then run your own tools across it in a, in your own environment in Linux or in Linux or whatever it is. Okay, do exactly what you want with that. You never have to go to analyze. Okay, but for everybody else, obviously you have the ability then to go to analyze, but even then, when you've analyzed the data, you have the ability to export that analytical data or the visualizations that you get and combine that data outside of the lab if you need to, or run your own analyses outside of the lab, or run your own visualizations on the data that you've created. Okay, so what we're trying to do with the lab is to make it as open as we possibly can, to give you the ability to kind of take data out at every stage and to do what you want. But there's two bits to this workflow that I haven't talked about yet, and they're probably the two most important bits. And those are the two bits on the edges, okay? Ideation and interpretation. And really, they're the two bits that don't really have anything to do with the lab per se. It's not like, we give you a tool that allows you to do these things within the lab, but they are in many ways the most important bit of the entire process. Okay, because ideation is really about constructing your research questions, as it says there, discovering phenomena. So my first and best piece of advice to you is, when you're using the lab, the best and most effective way of using it is to figure out what your research question is, to figure out what are you actually looking to do, what are you asking. And that could be anything. That could be as broad as you like. It could literally be, I'm looking to learn about the history of women in London in the 1890s or something like that. It could be a really broad topic, or it could be something sort of really really specific, like I'm looking to see attitudes to Tel Aviv in the Times newspaper in the 1960s or whatever it might be. Okay, but having an idea of a research question is incredibly important, because it leads in and it influences all the steps as you go. It influences how you build your content set, it influences how you clean it, and importantly, it influences how you analyze it, what tools you put against it, how you configure them, and how you interpret them. And then as you get to the end, you can see that there's a step at the end where you kind of reflect on your research questions and think, right, have I answered that? Or do I need to go down sort of different paths and think about other questions? And it's entirely consistent and entirely possible that once you've done something within the lab, you might interpret it and you might get to the end and think, oh, okay, right, that means that I have to go back around to the beginning again and change my research question and think about a new research question. And that's totally fine. And often what digital humanities is, and what digital humanities sort of research involves, is kind of testing hypotheses. Like going in there with an assumption and thinking, right, okay, can I prove or disprove this particular assumption in the same way that you would find within sort of scientific research. Okay, so that is the kind of workflow of the lab very, very broadly. And I'm going to jump very quickly into the tools now, just to give you, I'm going to sort of give you an overview of the tools, and I'm going to then look at some of the tools in a bit more depth. And then what I really want to do is get into the lab itself, so that we can start actually having a play with it, and you can start seeing these things in action. So within the lab, there are 6 tools, okay? 3 quantitative and 3 qualitative. These are we came up with what tools we were going to put in there, based entirely on customer feedback. Talking to academics about what tools they wanted to see, and what would be most useful for the largest number of people. And really what we wanted to have was a sort of range, so that there were tools here that were applicable for historians, there were tools here that were applicable for linguists, there were tools here that were applicable for people doing literature. Okay, so there's hopefully, whatever kind of research that you're doing, there's a tool or tools in here that will be useful to you. what can we say about this? Okay, so the tools themselves, and you'll see that I've said at the bottom of each of these where the tool comes from. And the tools are all from open sources, okay? As in they're all from open source websites that you can go to right now and use that tool if you wanted to, like without you going in the lab, you can just kind of go to that site, okay? And the reason for that is when we started building the lab and we started talking to academics about tools, the thing that they said very clearly was, for heaven's sakes, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't create your own tools because there are tools out there that work and they've been around for a long time, and they've been cited and they've been critiqued and they've been used in research again and again and again and again, and they just work. So use those tools, and that's exactly what we did. So basically we pulled in 6 well-known open source research tools, 3 quantitative, 3 qualitative, and we gave you kind of access to them through the lab. Importantly, as you're going to see, the one difference, or the one thing that we did do, is that we put a kind of skin over the top of them, a user interface that means that you don't need to know coding. Because if you went to any of these tools now, you'd need to know how to code. Most of them are based on Python. So you'd need to know how to kind of command line code to make them work. Okay, and now obviously that's fine. And I would imagine those of you who sort of said that you were very confident with digital humanities may well be very confident also with coding. But for those of you who described yourselves as not that confident, it's entirely possible that you don't know how to do Python coding, or coding in Java or R or whatever coding language takes your fancy. And that's fine, because in the lab you don't need to know that. Essentially, the skin that we've put over these tools means that it's as simple as putting a few numbers into a few boxes, so that you or me or anybody, no matter what our skill level, can create analyses. And obviously I'll show you how to do those. But before I do, I really want to talk about the tools just broadly. And you can see there within quantitative analysis, we've got parts of speech, name density recognition, and engrams. And then in qualitative, we have sentiment analysis, clustering, and topic modeling. So we're going to be focusing on kind of one of each broadly, but I'm going to try and show you as many of these in action as I can, just to give you an idea of what they do, and indeed sort of use cases in which you might think about using them. So when we start with engrams, what engrams does, it's about identifying a word or a phrase, identifying word or phrase counts across your content set. So you might already be familiar with the Google Ngram viewer. It's very, very similar. So you specify, and I'll go into this in a little bit more detail, what sort of length of phrase or word you want to put in there, and that will tell you how many of particular terms appear within your content set. So parts of speech analyzer, for example, it's quantitative because it will give you a count of the different parts of speech used by any authors. So it will tell you how many nouns were used, or how many adjectives, or how many punctuation marks or whatever by particular authors, which is obviously much more kind of literary analysis. For qualitative, it's not simply about counting terms or entities, but it's much more kind of requiring a subjective interpretation of the output to gain insights. So topic modeling here is a good example of a qualitative analysis, because it requires you, the user, to do some subjective critical thinking to understand the outputs of this tool, and I'm going to show you that. But both of these analysis types are incredibly useful, entirely depending on your project, depending on the question that you're asking. And in many projects, researchers will use these tools in tandem. So depending on what they're trying to do, they will use these tools together, either in sequence or in parallel. So let's have a look at engrams a little bit further. This is probably the simplest of the quantitative tools. So as I said, it's a tool that doesn't analyze textual features but extracts them. So what engrams builds on is it builds collocations of words from tokens, and tokens are essentially individual words. So tokens within a document or a content set. A collocation, just so as you know, is a series of words or terms that co-occur more often than they would be expected to by chance. Okay, so if words are sort of currently commonly kind of collocated together or collocated together, then it's deemed to be sort of slightly more than chance. So an engram is nothing more than a sequence of words where n represents the number of words. So if, for example, a unigram has one word, a bigram has two, a trigram has three, a fourgram has four, and so on and so on and so on. Engrams are often used to compile search terms or words that are often associated with one another. So for you, this tool could be used to help determine if a content set contains specific terminology or specific phrases, which otherwise could be difficult to trace without a kind of intensive reading of each document. So if I think about a use case, in the case of searching, engrams can be used to predict the possibility of a missing term. So that's a use case best seen in Google's predictive search term functionality that uses things like engrams. In a related use case, engrams can be used to index documents, which allows obviously for faster querying and full text search functionality. But engrams can also be used for text cleaning. So if you were to run a word frequency, which is just a unigram, text errors will surface. You can enter these errors into your stop words list, and I'll talk about stop words in just a second, to really strike them and ignore them from your content set prior to any analysis. So you can see these tools don't have a kind of set use. Okay, that's one thing that I really want to get across. The limit of the use of these tools, you are only limited by your imagination. Okay, and one of the fantastic things about digital humanities that I really enjoy is that I see new applications and new possibilities of the tools within our content, you know, on a kind of weekly basis. It's absolutely fantastic. So, okay, so that's engrams there, and I'll show you engrams in action in a bit. But, you know, just to give you an idea of research projects that have used engrams, this is Doug Duhame, who I don't think is not Notre Dame anymore. I think he's moved on. But this uses engrams to detect textual reuse. Okay, so he's looking for where a text has been kind of reused or copied in other text. So this article introduces a new approach to textual reuse studies to identify the sources of the previously unattributed quotations within the work of Eliza Haywood, who is an author from the 18th century, who I don't really know. But in it, Doug describes the combinatorial engram approach he used, and then shows how this method can help us better understand the complex inner workings of the author's most celebrated novel, Betsy Thoughtless. So celebrated to 18th century historians, but definitely not celebrated to me. But here you go. I mean, this is research using engrams. Here's another one here. From my friends at Utrecht University. So this is a paper, Mining Public Discourse for Emerging Dutch Nationalism. And in it, Van der Bos and Gifford use digital tools to search for expressions of nationalism in Dutch newspaper discourse in the late 19th century by text mining large newspaper repositories. So what they use are engrams to track the usage of words that refer to nation states over time. So the frequency of words like Nederland, which is the Netherlands, but also and forgive me, Monique, here. This you're going to hate me here. But this is it Tweede Kamer is the Dutch Parliament. Premier is the Prime Minister. Nationaal is national. Vaderland is fatherland, and Nederlands is Dutch. Did indeed rise over the 19th century. So in this example, in this project, they actually they use both engrams and topic modeling to do their research. And this leads me on quite nicely onto the next tool that we're going to talk about within the lab, and that is topic modeling. And this is oh, sorry, no, it isn't. I'm sorry. This is I've gone forward a slide. No, this is the setup for engrams. So this is where I just want to talk through that skin that we put over the top of the tools, so that anyone can use them, irrespective of whether you have coding skill or not. So this is the tool setup page for engrams in the lab. So for the lab, the tool that the lab uses for engrams is the Apache Lucene tokenizer, which identifies strings of words based on the configurations options that you sent here. So this is a screenshot of the tool setup page within the lab. And from here, we set up the configurations prior to running an analysis. So I'm just going to show you these in detail here, just to show you the kinds of things that you'll expect to see when we go into the lab. So the first bit is, how many engrams do you want to capture? So if you set a minimum and maximum of 1, you'll be running a term frequency. So the algorithm will return a list of the most frequently occurring words, single words. Whereas if you want more context in your results, you might select minimum and maximum at 4. Then you'll get a string of 4 words which are next to each other in a sentence. The maximum engram size is 6, just so as you know. And if you leave the defaults, you'll receive unigrams, bigrams, trigrams, and 4grams. If you only want to look at try and bi, you need to set the minimum maximum to the same number. So you do minimum 2 and maximum 3. Okay. So this is how many times an engram needs to occur in your content set before it's included in your analysis results. So if a word appears only once in your content set, it's probably not that significant, and you want to set the threshold higher than this. Obviously, the higher you set the threshold, the more times the word or phrase is going to appear within your content set, and therefore potentially the more significant it is, but it depends entirely again on your research question. So the next thing, here you choose the number of engrams you want to include in your visualization. By default, the system returns 1,000. Personally, I think that's quite a lot. You know, when we're looking at something like a word cloud, 1,000 words is quite a lot. So often I bring this down to between about 50 and 100. Otherwise, a bar chart or a word cloud gets a bit unwieldy. You have the ability to apply your cleaning configuration. So you don't have to, you can say none for cleaning configuration if you don't want to apply one. And I'll show you the cleaning configuration in more depth and show you the cleaning tool within the lab and what it can actually do for you. I'm going to run an example using engrams as well to show you why I think the cleaning configuration is incredibly important and really, really, really useful. You set up your cleaning configuration before you run the analysis tool, okay? So there is a default provided, and I'll show you what's in that, but just so as you know, it doesn't remove things like punctuation or numerical characters, and that could be a lot of noise within an engram result. So especially for engrams, using a cleaning tool is really, really important. I would thoroughly recommend it. Finally, you have the ability to add a name to your run of the particular tool. I would always advise that you name it something meaningful, because in time, you know, you're going to come back in 6 months' time and you're going to look at your results and think, oh, I can't remember at all what I did there. So the more kind of meaningful you can be, and you can see over on the left-hand side, just to the left of this, where it's got run history, you've got the 3 different runs that I've done of this tool on my content set. And you know, that shows me that I've done one where I'm looking just at unigrams, one where I was looking at bigrams, and then one where I added in stop words. So I've kind of got an idea of what I was doing in there. So, you know, I like to put as much detail into those as possible. So I might put something like 25 engrams or something like that. So useful to really think about your naming convention and you know, how that's going to be useful to you as we go. So one final thing. Yes, of course.
Oh, there's a question.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do you want to read it or shall I read it?
Oh, no, yeah, go for it. Oh, God, let me have a look here. Let me read it. Thank you, Mom. So I'm not sure I understand. What is the database these tools search these terms in? Do I, as a research of history via genealogy research, can search for information I didn't already find by myself and add to the database? And are there tools to take information gathered from genealogical historical records and add it into a huge table or a GEDCOM file and analyze them comparatively? That's a really good question. And sort of multi-layered. I'm going to start answering it and then not be able to answer some of it. Okay, so apologies because I don't know necessarily what a GEDCOM file is. But what the database, these tools are searching for these terms in, and you're going to see it in a second, is all the historical archives that Tel Aviv own from us. Okay, so when I show it to you, I'm going to be searching through my own access to the lab. So I'm going to be searching through absolutely everything. When it comes to you guys searching through it, you're going to search through something sort of slightly different. And that's totally fine. You're seeing exactly what Tel Aviv have purchased. You know, Tel Aviv have been buying these historical archives for a long time. Just to talk about genealogy, for example, as talking about history via genealogy, obviously things like historical newspapers are incredibly important for genealogy. So you'll be able to search, you know, through obituaries, births, marriages, and deaths, and all the other kind of aspects of newspapers that would be useful for genealogy research and family history research. When it comes to comparing that with other sources, non-Gale sources, and I'll show you this in a bit as well, you have the ability to upload your own content into the lab and to run the lab tools across that content. That content has to be in a very specific form. It has to be in a text file, so a .txt file, which is the kind of simplest file format. So I don't know what format you've got it in at the moment. And obviously, if it's kind of in a big table, it might need to, it might not be able to be uploaded in that form. But if you've got the text as sort of literally text data, then you can upload it into the lab, and then you could, for example, run engrams across it. So thank you for that question. I hope that answers most of it. And as we go into the lab itself, hopefully more of it will become clear to you. But if it doesn't, do unmute or do sort of add into the text a bit more context, and I'll be happy to kind of answer further. But thank you for that. There we go. Thank you. My pleasure. I hope that was useful. Okay. So that's engrams. And before I go on, I just want to talk very, very briefly. I talked about engrams as possibly a tool that can help you clean the data. So let me sort of show you what I mean by that. And click on the slide. There we go. Then. When I run the engram tool with a maximum and minimum threshold set to 1, so I'm just looking for kind of unigrams, what I'm going to return is a list of the most common words in my content set. Okay, I can then download that output if I want to. Well, I'll show you how you can download it in a bit. But when I download it, I'll get something that looks like this. You know, and these are the most common engrams within a particular content set. Okay, now you can see here that a lot of these are kind of nonsense words. So I've got individual letters, and then I've got, you know, FT and things like that. Some of these I'm going to want, you know, Egypt I might want, new, water, Nile, miles, Egyptian, Cairo, London, but some of them are probably, you know, useless to me. But being able to quickly identify those through engram and then download the data, I can then take those nonsense words, or those words that I don't want to appear in my analysis, and I can plug them into my stop words in my content set. Okay, and then when I've done that, all of those will get excluded from future analyses that I do using that cleaning configuration. So engram can be a really useful tool as a kind of primary tool, as something, you know, just to run across a data set, to understand it in broad detail, but also to be able to pull out a list of words that I don't want to appear in future analyses. And then after that, I could run, say, topic modeling or another tool. Okay. So on we move to the next analysis tool that I'm going to talk about, and this is named entity recognition. I'm going to be showing you this today because I think it's a really, really, really useful an interesting tool, and something that I thoroughly recommend that you have a look at. So NER is an example of a quantitative analysis method. And the NER tool that we've incorporated comes from this Spacey open source library. What it does essentially is it recognizes and extracts named entities from documents within a content set, and then it creates a list of those entities. So what it doesn't do is it doesn't analyze textual features, but it just extracts them. Okay, so rather than a user having to generate or to know, for example, keywords or people, groups or places that are prevalent within their content set, the NER analysis will just compile those entities for you to learn which ones surface from your selected documents. It's a fantastic way to start drilling down into a content set, to become really familiar with a collection. Okay, so or as another idea, you could use these entities to create whole new data sets if you want to. So, for example, I could use the dates extracted to build a timeline or places to create a map. Okay, so often I use NER as a way of extracting certain entities from which I then do a further analysis, either within the lab or indeed outside of the lab, like I would do with a map or something. It's really, really, really great and a fantastic tool, and we'll show you that. But then on probably to my favorite one, and I'm going to talk about topic modeling now briefly before we go and have a look at this in the lab, but I wanted to kind of explain it to you here. Topic modeling, it's the other tool that we're going to be focusing on today, and it's an example of a qualitative tool which relies on the user to interpret or to assign meaning to the output. So when you run topic modeling, the algorithm will sift through your content set and group together themes or topics that it considers related in some way. Okay, so topic modeling is used to analyze a large corpus. Essentially, what it's doing is it's making sense of a large set of unstructured data. So generally, although you can use it on, 2 documents if you want to, I generally think about, starting around, 100 documents, 150 documents, in order to identify a set of topics that occur across a collection. A topic is a group of terms that frequently occur together or in proximity to one another in your corpus. So you can see there the top image here shows how different words are being placed into different topics as indicated by the different colors. So based on the results that Mallet provides, and Mallet is the tool that we use, it's a tool that does a topic modeling form called LDA, or later direct allocation. So based on the results Mallet provides, researchers name the topics in order to assign meaning to them. So that's where you come in. You have to assign that meaning to them. So this need to assign meaning is where the qualitative analysis comes into play. So Miriam Posner, who's well known within digital humanities, notes that it should be abundantly clear that no part of this process is scientific. It's just one way of getting your head around a large body of text. So there's no right or wrong topic name, just schemas that do and don't help you find interesting features of the text you're looking at. So yeah, so what's really cool about Mallet is how it addresses one challenge in machine reading, in that it uses contextual clues to connect words with similar meaning, but are completely different. So for example, happy has a lot of synonyms, or words that mean the same thing but are different, such as content, joyful, mirthful, upbeat, but they all mean relatively the same thing. And Mallet can recognize this similarity. But Mallet can also differentiate between words that are spelled the same but that have completely different meanings. So in the text example at the bottom here, we use the term bat, which can be a piece of sports equipment, or it can be an animal. And Mallet will recognize that, and it will put those into the right buckets. So the image at the bottom of the slide illustrates the principle, where topic 1 has terms like organize, lead, commit, and direct. Topic 2 is where the spelling is the same, but the meaning is very, very different. So where lead is to do with leadership, it goes into the first 2 buckets, but where it's to do with lead, it goes into the one to do with heavy metal poisoning. Okay. So, and as a last note about topic modeling, it's helpful if you have familiarity with your data set prior to running a topic model. So this might seem counterintuitive if you're planning to use topic modeling to help you find out more about a large corpus, yet it's really important that you at least have an idea of what should be there. So topic modeling is not an exact science by any means. The only way to know if your results are useful or wildly off the mark is to have a general idea of what you should be seeing. So again, it's that idea of kind of going in there with an assumption and seeing if this relates to it. Now, I've put a couple of examples of topic modeling in here. As I said, it's a really useful thing. I'll let you kind of have a look at those when I send through the presentation later. And in my final slide, this is the tool setup page for topic modeling. So just to give you an idea of what it is before we go in and have a look at it. So this is the tool setup. So you choose the number of words you'd like to appear in each topic. So 10 is a pretty reasonable default. You then choose the number of topics. So you could start with 10, but then you increase the number to see what else you can discover if you want to. So this is an idea of kind of being iterative with this. And depending on the size of your content set, it may seem best to cast a wider net in part to see what kinds of words appeared in the models created by Mallet. Requesting more words than the default and doubling the topics produces finer grained topics, reflecting the size of the content set. You would want to do this if you have over 200 or so documents, otherwise the defaults are a great starting point. So after that, we then have the number of iterations or the number of times the algorithm cycles through the content set before returning a result. So it's set to 1,000 by default, and I'd say that's probably fine to stick with. So you can increase it if you want to, if you wanted to kind of run through a lot more times, but bear in mind it will probably go slow if you do that. Again, you can apply your cleaning configuration here as appropriate. Some things to note about Mallet: it's powered by the topic modeling tool, and it's case sensitive. So if you decide in your cleaning configurations to make everything lowercase, it won't distinguish between, for example, Smith, which is somebody's last name, and Smith, which is an occupation like a blacksmith. Okay, and now you can run your run name, and again call it something meaningful. So you might want to put in how many topics you've done in there, how many terms, etc. Just to remind you. All right. So with all that said and done, there was one other thing in the chat. So is it possible to construct a model and then apply it to a corpus? Or is there a built-in model in the lab? Great question. Well, yeah, so the tools are what are built in the lab, and they've all got a default to them. You can just run that model if you want to, but as you've seen with topic modeling, you create your own. You create your own model. You say how many topics you want, how many terms you want within there, and how you define it defines exactly how you the model that you run. So in that sense, you can construct your own model and apply it to your own corpus. All right. So this is the bit where we go and have a look hands-on. So I'm just going to switch my screen over to the lab. Now, maybe Monique, if you can just tell me, can you see my screen? I should have switched to the lab now.
Yes, I can see it.
Thanks, Monique. Brilliant. Right, and so for the next kind of 30, 35 minutes, what we're going to be doing is having a look at some of these things in more detail. Okay, and as you saw, when I got to the lab, I need to be able to log in or create an account. It's just thinking about it now. My internet's going a bit slow. That is just allowing you to set yourself up as a named user. Okay, we use 3 options to do that. Most commonly are used at Google or Microsoft, and if you've got a Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive account, and you can use your Tel Aviv email in there, that will work. We also have shibboleth authentication. So if Tel Aviv uses shibboleth, and that might be a question for the librarians, then you can authenticate using shibboleth as well. But once I'm signed in, you can see up here at the top, it tells me that I'm signed in. And that means that I've got a named account in here where all my research will be, and I will be able to access this on any device, on my phone if I want to, etc., etc. So before I start searching, I'm just going to show you, there's your workflow. Build, clean, analyze. And there's a lot of help within here, and you can see a lot of the help underneath here, all, as I said, created by experts in digital humanities, people actually teaching digital humanities. For those of you in the library or in the faculty, or indeed those of you who want to learn about these techniques and these processes in more detail, or indeed those of you who want to teach these processes in more detail, this is the Learning Center. Okay, and I'm just clicking on it now, and that is, as I said, sort of created, with sort of the latest pedagogical principles in mind. And really what it is, the Learning Center, is a collection of help materials, help guides, videos, all that sort of thing, and a lot more. Okay, I just want to highlight it very, very quickly because it's sort of slightly more than that. It's here to give you advice as well. So advice on selecting the right tool. So if you're wondering, which of these tools do I apply to my project, that will really, really help you. And even within the tools themselves, it will tell you what the tool is, it will tell you how you use it, but it will also tell you why you should use it. Okay, so here's a use case here. Why would you use engrams? Well, here's a use case as to why you would use it, and then a lot about how you'd interpret the results, and indeed more If you are kind of technologically minded, much more around the enhancement notes and indeed, you know, what the tool itself actually is. A couple of last things to point out for kind of teachers in the room. There's a lot here, in curriculum materials, a lot here to help you. So if you want to use the tool in your classroom, then there's things like sample syllabi, there are learning objectives, there are curriculums, project outlines and things. All of them are free and freely available for you to use. So by all means, do take these things away and use these to your heart's content. And then the final thing to point out for everybody is that we also have sample projects within the lab. So if you want a kind of fully worked through example of a project in the lab, then you can download these, okay? You can download them by clicking get a copy here, and that will just download it to your own instance of the lab. And essentially this is, again, we've had these written, we commission these from historians, from academics. These are fully worked through academic projects. So starting with a research question, that you can expand here to more precise research questions, and taking you through how you build your search, how you clean, how you analyze, all the way through to how you look at your visualizations, and indeed at the end to how you might expand the project and go on from there. Okay, so these are there for you to use. They're embedded in the lab, and I would thoroughly recommend them because they're very, very useful. But I'm going to start by taking you kind of through the workflow and looking at a few projects to give you an idea of what the tools are and how you might use them. But before I do that, I'm going to talk about kind of building a project, okay? And I'm going to go obviously to the build section to do that. And you can see I've got my workflow up here: build, clean, analyze, and indeed my content sets. Now in build, I've got two options, okay? On the left, this searches through my Gale data. So as I said, when you asked about what data am I actually searching through, what is actually in here, well, it's your Gale data. This is a sort of broad search, but if you're interested and you want to know what actually you have within the lab, then if you go into your advanced search, then you'll see that you've got by archive. This has everything that I have within the lab. Okay, so this will be different to what you can see when you eventually start looking at the lab. But when you look at this, you'll see all the electronic resources that you have as part of Tel Aviv Library. Okay, and that is all there. And I'm going to do an advanced search in a minute. But before I do that, I just want to show you the other section, and that is the upload section here. As you can see, upload is in beta. So we're still developing this, and we're very much looking for feedback. If you've got feedback, then there's an email there and we'd love to hear from you. But what this does is it allows you to add your own content into the lab. Now, that content has to be in sort of fairly specific forms, okay? And you choose it from your desktop here. Here I have all the collected writings of an author called Washington Irving, okay? And I've just taken these, I think I got these from Hathi Trust, I think, in the past. But, you know, essentially this is just data documents that I've got from somewhere. And you can get these from anywhere. There are repositories of information everywhere. I imagine the library has vast repositories of this. Presumably many of you have your own personal repositories, and that's great. But whether it's Google Books or Hathi Trust or anything from the National Library of Israel, I know that obviously, you know, Hebrew University and the National Library have an awful lot of sort of collections as well. So it doesn't really matter where you get the content from. All that matters is that it needs to be in a certain format, and that's this TXT format, .txt. The reason for that is it's the simplest format, it's the smallest format, and it means that we're confident they won't have any pictures and things like that. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build this out. And so what we're doing is we're starting with the kind of simplest type of document that we can do. In time, we will include more types of documents and broaden it out to things like PDFs and indeed other types of data documents as well. But really what we're trying to do is kind of get it right in the first instance. Okay, so we've stuck to kind of text files because in essence, this is a text and data mining platform, and things like pictures tend to kind of confuse it after a while. you add your content into the lab, and you can add metadata to it. So you can either add metadata in bulk by kind of adding, quickly by kind of adding metadata across everything that you upload, or you can add it in bulk by downloading a form, adding your metadata at your document level. So if your document has different metadata types, you can add it all there, and then kind of re-uploading that file again, so that it applies it to all the data that you've added into the lab. A couple of other things to say about data in the lab, because I'm sure that this question will come up, and it would have been a question that I answered in the first session, but for those of you who weren't there, the lab doesn't work very well with non-Latin scripts. Okay, so for Hebrew, it's not going to work very well with that. I think you can upload Hebrew text files, but even if you've got them in the lab, the tools won't work with them, because the tools aren't set up to analyze Hebrew, or indeed Chinese or Arabic, or other languages. These are things that we're looking to do. But so as you know, when it comes to training the tools to work on these individual languages, and bear in mind that even when we talk about Hebrew, that's not one language. We've got, modern Hebrew. We've also got, ancient Hebrew. Hebrew from 200 years ago would look very different, obviously, to what it looks like now. So you kind of need all of these lexicons. You need things that tell you where the words are, and all of this. And so training the tools to work with these languages probably takes about 3 months to do. So it's something where, we need to kind of put a lot of resource behind it. We are looking to do that kind of thing, and always, and this is a thing that I always ask at this point, I'm always on the lookout for academics who are working with text mining languages like Hebrew or Arabic, to understand how they're doing it, because I think we know that digital humanities is quite sort of Anglo-centric, I suppose. It's based a lot on English language, and we would like to support the community in kind of broadening that out and widening that out. So if there are any academics kind of working on creating OCR at scale on these kind of things, then we'd love to have a conversation, basically. Does Greek work? It does, but again, the tools aren't set up to mine Greek, I don't think. So some of the tools work better than others. Often quantitative works better than qualitative, and that's simply because there isn't the lexicon in the tools to work on, for example, ancient Greek. You need to add the lexicon in there. But certainly, if you're using it, it's interesting to know what you're doing, and that's something that I will make a note of and feedback to our development team. So that's language. In terms of size, when it comes to uploading into the lab, you can upload as much as you want. You can upload it in 10 megabyte chunks, so 10 megabytes at a time, but there is no limit to what you upload. So upload as much as you want, upload it into the lab, and when you add it into the lab, basically you've got the ability then to manage your uploads, and you can see this here. Here are all the documents that I have uploaded into the lab, with various different kind of metadata points, the file size, and etc. So, if I want to, I can narrow it down to my Washington Irving texts, and then I can just select those ones and add it to a particular content set. Obviously, it means I can run these through the pipeline on their own. I can also combine them with Gale data if I want to. So if going back to that example on genealogy, if I've got my own genealogy content, I can upload that into the lab. I can mix it together with the newspapers that I've got from Gale as one content set, and then I can analyze that together. Okay, so you can analyze these things separately or together, absolutely fine. But I'm going to go back to build very quickly, because I'm going to do an example just to show you how you would build in here. And this is an example of a PhD thesis from 2012. And I'm going to show you how I can do in about a minute what took the PhD candidate in 2012 about 6 months to do. Okay, to just sort of show the time-saving nature of this. Now, this project was all about portrayals of women's suffrage in in the Times newspaper, specifically within editorials within a specific date range. Okay, so I'm going to search for the word suffrage, but using an asterisk to find me suffrage, suffragette, suffragism, any alternative word. I'm going to search for entire document, and then if I wanted to, I could narrow it down to just the Times newspaper, but I'm not actually going to do that. Okay, instead, I'm going to search through all the newspapers that I've got. And the researcher at the time, Kat Gupta, was searching for 7 years between 1907 and 1914, and searching through all of the issues of the Times for those 7 years took about 6 months, as I said. But I'm going to go even bigger than that. I'm going to go 50 years. So 1870 down to 1920. And then I have the ability to just narrow down my search a little bit further. So I can search by content types. You know, do I want to look for monographs or manuscripts or newspapers? I can look by language. I can look by source library, or does it have an illustration? But the key one here is that I want editorials. So I'll go to document type, and this is really useful. Select editorial, and then click search. And this is that, you know, this is it taking me about a minute, hopefully to do. As I said, this is what took Kat Gupta about 6 months. So what I want to get forward here is, for those of you who are really confident in digital humanities and do this kind of research a lot, it's entirely possible that this will be the benefit of the lab to you. The ability to use a kind of graphical user interface to quickly and radically speed up the content creation process, and indeed the cleaning process, and then to kind of go from there. There's a lot more that we can talk about on this page, but I'm not really going to talk about it. Really, for everybody, I just want to sort of point out, it's not really that simple. It's not as simple as just saying, right, I've done my search and here's everything I've got, because you still need to be critical. There's still a point at which, you know, you need to kind of apply your critical brain here. And we've given you a lot of help to do that. So you might want to limit your search by particular, I don't know, publication titles, to just select publications aimed at women, say like the Women's Journal or whatever. You might want to look at the metadata. And this here, on the right-hand side, I'm just highlighting it now, is the metadata. Okay, so this is the metadata for this, or some of the metadata for this particular talk, and it will sort of tell you about it. There's one further bit of metadata, which is this, OCR confidence. Now, very quickly, OCR confidence isn't the same as OCR accuracy. Okay, they're two slightly different things. OCR confidence just measures how well the OCR engine thinks it's done in creating the kind of background text. And if you don't know what OCR is, let me show you very, very quickly what OCR is. OCR stands for optical character recognition, and is essentially this bit on the right-hand side. And I'm highlighting it now. Okay, there we are there. This bit on the right-hand side, it is the process that we go through is we take a digitized image, which is this on the left-hand side. We take that digitized image and we run it through OCR software to create this on the right-hand side, machine readable text. And this is how all of our databases are full text searchable. And this text here, this OCR text, is what you are actually analyzing when you work in the lab. Okay, and you can see there, it's not perfect. I don't think it's 31% though. I think actually it's probably better than that. So you can have low confidence and high accuracy, and you can have high accuracy. You can have, sorry, low accuracy and high confidence. That is consistent. But in this case, what we've got is something that has sort of quite low confidence. It wasn't necessarily very confident that it had done a good job, and I think it's probably because, I don't know if you can see in the text here, but you see some of it is darker than others. So on the right-hand side of the column, it's a bit faded. So I wonder whether that has thrown the engine off. But actually, this appears, it's not actually that bad here, and this might be something that we use. Okay. For what it's worth, finding bad OCR, well, you've got a few choices. One of them is you could just throw that piece of content away. You could say, right, I'm not going to use that. It's bad OCR. It's going to skew my research. I'm not going to use it. Okay, but maybe more usefully, you can actually rectify it if you need to. So you can download the OCR if you want to, and you can kind of correct it by hand. So you can kind of transcribe it in Microsoft Notes or something like that. Or you can use the cleaning tool. Okay, so if we have a look at the cleaning tool here, just to show you what the cleaning tool does, because I've talked about it quite a lot. Here is the cleaning tool, and you can run this across any content set before any analysis or when you're downloading it, okay? For what it's worth, a content set, the maximum size is 10,000 documents, and I'm going to show you how you create your content set in just a second. But when it comes to the cleaning configuration, this is the cleaning configuration, okay? You can create your own configurations here on the left-hand side. So these are all my configurations, okay? Now, you're going to see here, if you look at the titles, that I've created some configurations based on content types. I've created some configurations based on particular analyses. I've even created some configurations based on particular languages, I think, oh, maybe I've got rid of that. I used to have a Spanish one in there that I use. But, you know, you can see there that I've done one for Australian adverts. I've done one for a project I did on China in trade. One of the ones that I use a lot is engram cleaning. So this is one that I use for engrams, and I'll show you this in action in just a second. And the cleaning tool is useful because it's very powerful. It does a lot of things that you could do to really make your analysis better, okay? So you have the ability to make everything lowercase if you want to, but remember, with tools like named entity recognition, or indeed with Mallet, their case matters, so you might not want to do that. You can remove certain characters, remove number characters if you want to. That's always really useful. You can remove special characters or specific special characters like, you know, hashtags or plus signs or whatever, or punctuation. By default, it removes certain things that appear, like certain problems that appear in OCR, like line breaks or tabs or multiple spaces. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. And you can do things like, you can do find and replace. So if I show you, I think I've got a cleaning tool that does that. Let's have a look here. Is it this one here? This might have more. Yeah, there we go there. So I've done a lot of find and replace based on common errors that appeared within the content set that I was doing. So, you know, I did a run. It came up with some errors, or rather, it showed me where there were some errors in the text, and I was able to fix those using find and replace there. You've also got a stop words list here. Stop words are basically words that get excluded from your analysis. Okay, so common words that you think, right, I don't need those within my analysis, like a and the and he and she and it and all of that sort of thing. You don't have to have one if you don't want to, so you can clear that if you want to, or you could choose, you know, multiple stop words. So I can put Hebrew in there because we do have some Hebrew content within our Gale product. So if I select those two things there, so there's my Hebrew starter list, but I can also add to that if I want to. So if I've got individual, sorry, whoops, hello, mistake there. So if I've got individual letters cropping up and I don't want those to be in there, then I can just add those in there, and those will get excluded from my analysis as well. So cleaning configurations are incredibly useful. You can put a name against them, and once you've saved them, you can also test them. Just test them across a random selection of 10 documents so you can see if they're doing what they should be doing before you apply them to your analysis. All right, all of that said, so let's go and have a look at the tools themselves. Oh, I said that I'd show you how you build a content set. I'm sorry, I've gone the wrong way. I need to go back this way. You build your content set from your results page just by selecting a set of documents, and you can select up to 10,000 documents if you want to by doing that. You then add it to a content set, and this is the heart of the lab. This is your projects, okay? This is what you're working through. So if I wanted to add them to, you know, adverts with Australia, then I would do that, and then I would click add to content set, and that is how it works, okay? But instead, I'm going to go very quickly to my content set because I kind of want to show you some of these tools in action to show them, to give you an idea of how they might be working. Okay, let's start with engrams because I said that I would start with there, and I think I've got an engrams. Where is it? I renamed it as something, and now it has decided to run away from me. Let me just do a quick find. Where is it? Engram. There we go. Okay, abolitionist narratives. There it was. It's a clean example. So I'm going to show you this one here. You call these what you want. These are your projects, okay? So when we're looking here, these are my projects. So let me show you an example that I've got just using 2 documents. So 2 documents from Echo. These are the 2 documents. I did this in a class of undergraduates in December. These are just 2 abolitionist texts with narratives written by slaves or ex-slaves within there. And if we have a look at my analyses, then you can see that I've got engrams within here. And I'm going to show you 2, well, a before and after. So the first thing I'm going to do, let's go to analyze, because when I've got my, where is it? So, clean example, abolition narratives. See, now it's not in alphabetical order, so now I can't find it. Oh, there it is, down the bottom. Right, there we are. So now that I've got my thing here, let me just show you the tool itself and how we set it up. So if we go and look at the tool, then I'm going to switch to my first run, which I didn't put a name to. So here it is on the left, and I've got the default cleaning configuration. I did minimum 1 for engrams, maximum 4, and a threshold of 2. So what I did when I got that is this word cloud. So this will take a second or 2. Sometimes it goes a bit slowly. But when this comes through, what we're going to see is a word cloud with quite a lot of noise in it. Noise is one of those words that gets kind of thrown around in digital humanities, and essentially kind of words, phrases, symbols, anything that kind of skews your research or gets in the way of your research, okay? Things that sort of don't help you get to exactly kind of what you're looking for. So here we are here, and here's my noise, okay? So, you know, what's that? A bracket is that, I think, as the biggest occurrence. I've got you know, punctuation marks here. I've got question marks. You know, this isn't particularly useful for me. I've got a few things that I can see that are useful, but really that's not particularly great. So I'm going to switch over and I'm going to show you the cleaning configuration that I did. Okay, so I'm going to switch to, excuse me here, switch to the cleaned run for engrams and show you that one. So we're now in the cleaned run, and you can see it's exactly the same, but all I've done is add a different configuration, different cleaning configuration. And let me show you that. So this is the cleaning configuration now that I added for that. And it's quite an aggressive one. You can see I've called it aggressive clean for engrams. So I'm removing a lot of number characters, special characters, all the punctuation. And in my starter list, I've done things like I've added all the alphabet. So single letters of the alphabet, because I don't want those to appear. And how does that reflect in the analysis and in the visualization that I got? And again, it'll take a second to come through, but hopefully what I'll see is a much more useful word cloud, much more useful visualization that is much more something that I can use as a starting point for research, or indeed as an endpoint, something that I can download here, and I could, you know, take it out of the lab and pop it into a project or onto a website or whatever it is that I was interested in doing. So engrams is a great place to start. I would thoroughly advise that. It's a great place to start. Obviously, it tells you the most commonly occurring words and phrases, but it gives you a great overview of what it is that you're looking at. And that could be a document set of 10,000 documents, or it could be a document set like I've done of 2 documents. It really doesn't matter. It just gives you a better kind of overview of what it is that you're looking at. So you can see here, this is a much more useful thing here. And frankly, if I was doing this again, I would probably do fewer engrams. So I think I've got 1,000 in here. I would take it down probably to 100. But I can now see that, you know, this talks about man and time, great, bored, and God is in there, men, thy. So a lot of these things are obviously being pitched, you know, being talked, you know, somebody talking to God, I think within these particular narratives. Okay, so that's engrams, great place to start, great thing to look at. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my my example, and I'm going to go back to my suffrage editorials, because now I want to show you topic model. okay? So within suffrage, so this, just to remind you, the suffrage editorials thing that I was doing is I was looking for mentions of the word suffrage anywhere within these editorials, within the Times, within a particular year period. So between about 1870 and 1920. And I did a lot of analysis within this. And the one I'm going to look at here is topic modeling, okay? And just again, to sort of show you the setup that I did. So I've got this one, that one's no longer available, that's fine. I'm going to go to my first run in a second. So this is a nice simple one. Let's switch to my first run topic model here. There we go, I can see my results, fantastic. I can add a clean configuration if I want to. I can tell it how many words per topic, how many topics, and how many iterations. Most of the time I leave this as default, but as I said before, if you want to get more granular, if you want to get into more detail, then you're going to want more topics or more words per topic, and this allows you to go into more depth in understanding your particular content set. And to give you an idea, the content set that I've got is about 2,000 documents here. So this is what I'm analyzing when I show you this. Okay, so this is topic modeling. And what topic modeling does is it's a way of making sense of a large set of unstructured data. This is the result you'll get in the start. Okay, you'll get a topic identified as topic 5. You'll have the terms that come within that topic. So these are the words that commonly co-occur together. So more than probability says they should, okay? But this is where it's qualitative, because you now have to identify what this topic is, okay? So it's your job to look at these terms, to look at the documents from which they come, or the documents within that entire topic, to kind of understand what this is about. And if I scroll to the top, you'll see that I've done that in certain circumstances. So I've looked at women misses suffrage, woman, women's miss suffrage, work, vote, and meeting. And, it says to me that that is about women or women. So that's what I've identified it as, okay? This second one, state, people, government, election, favor, convention, public, political, free, and men. Well, I think that that's probably to do with US politics, okay? And as I go on, I think I'm probably right. So the first thing I do is I identify them. I can then compare them if I want to. So what I'm doing here is I'm running a comparison on tokens. Tokens, as we've seen, is the number of words. It's essentially just words. So this is the number of words applied to each of the topics within my content set. And it's depressing, although not at all surprising, that even within a topic about women's suffrage, men is by far and away the topic that has the most words applied to it, and women is just here. But even this is useful, because this tells me something, and it allows me to identify just the documents that I'm interested in within my content set. So they're going to be within this woman or women section, okay? And there's a further bit with topic modeling, because it allows me to look at the documents within my content set through the lens of my model, okay? So now what I'm looking at are individual documents with the proportion of each of the topics that I've identified shown here. So the one I like is women or woman. So what this allows me to do is to find just the documents that are kind of more heavily weighted towards this particular topic, okay? And if I click on this, I can go and read that particular document. So hopefully this will help you with things like your close reading. Right, I'm aware of time, so I'm just going to show you a couple of other very, very quick things to give you an idea of some of these other tools. Okay, so back to my content sets. What else do I want to show you? Well, I'm going to show you named entity recognition for a start. Where do I want to show you that? So I think if I have a look in, where have I done it? So, okay, I think we can look in here. Okay, Searchlight, this is a good one. So the Searchlight, if you've never heard of it, is a publication that is reports on far right and fascism, and indeed extremist groups. It's based in the UK, but it reports on kind of extremist groups kind of around the world. And what I did is I just found all the documents within the Searchlight archive for a 30-year period, 1970 to 2000. And what I could do then is, by running these analyses, I ran named entity recognition. Named entity recognition is great because it allows me to pull out particular entities that appear within my content set here. So it could be geography or geopolitical entities, so names and so places, it could be artwork or product, but something like person is incredibly useful. So if I just select people, then this finds the most commonly occurring people or entities that have been identified as persons within this particular thing. You know, Hitler is at the top, but you know, people like John Tyndall, who's a very famous kind of, or was a very famous kind of UK fascist leader. John Tyndall is a nom de plume, isn't it? That wasn't his real name. You know, Mosley was a fascist leader around about the Second World War, and so on and so on and so forth. So we can really pull out these entities and we can go and kind of research them a little bit further. Now, that's everything that I kind of wanted to show you today. I'm aware of time, so I'm kind of going to wrap it up here. There are more tools within here that I haven't got time to be able to show you. And I would thoroughly recommend that you go and have a look at the Learning Centre to kind of learn more about those. And really, it depends entirely on the research question that you're asking for. So, for example, this project here has, again, 2 documents within it, has Robinson Crusoe and Gulliver's Travels. And the analysis that I've done on them is just one analysis, parts of speech, which is essentially allowing me to compare and contrast the writing styles of the 2 authors of these particular books. Okay, so I can do that there. Clustering is another tool that allows me to identify particular clusters of documents within large sets of documents. And then the final tool that we have is sentiment analysis, which essentially identifies sentiment, positive or negative or neutral sentiment within your documents. You know, are there a majority of kind of positive words or negative words, or indeed neutral words within what you're looking for? All of them can be useful, entirely dependent on the question that you're asking. Yeah. So that is everything that I wanted to talk about. I'm aware of time, so thank you very much for your patience. Let me stop here and ask, what questions do we have? I can see there's no questions in the chat, but if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question now, or indeed just post a question in the chat, I'd be more than happy to answer it. Is any of that unclear that we've gone through? Any questions that anybody has? Anyone at all? How are we feeling? My pleasure, Doug. Thank you. There was a lot to go through in there, as you see. You know, this is one of those things that I could easily, you know, take an entire morning taking you through all of these things in depth. But I hope that that's kind of giving you guys a bit of a flavour of what you can do. Does anybody have any questions? I'm always wary when there's no questions. Either it means the session's gone really, really well, or really, really badly.
It's gone really, really well, Chris.
Everyone's just sat there going, oh, I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, Gilad, you've got a lot of questions. Feel free to ask me. That's fine. Like, I can be here as long as you can be here. If you want to unmute Gilad and ask me, then by all means. Thumbs up there from Gilad. Thank you. Just a second. Oh, Gilad, I think I'm worried now. He's kind of getting all his questions, all your questions in order now, and I'm worried about me. I'm just need to articulate my thoughts. Okay. While you're articulating your thoughts, Gilad, I will say for everybody else, if there are no further questions, it's just hit past. So I say thank you very much for coming. If you need to leave now, by all means, please do. As I said, if you've sent me your emails, or if I've got your emails, I will send you the presentation that I did. I will also try and send you some other follow-up materials as well, so that you've got a record of this beyond the session. I'll send you the recording of the session too. But thank you very much for coming. I hope it was useful. And I look forward to speaking to you at the next one of these things, whenever that might be. Thank you, everybody. And Gilad, I shall be here as long as you are, so I'll look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, everybody. Oh, this is great. Gilad's just put on his mic. Right. Ido, what's the difference between uploading Hebrew text and using Hebrew documents from the database? Yeah, that's a good question. To be honest, it's one of those things that on which I haven't really done a lot of research. Ido, I'm sort of, I'd be interested to see what your experience is. There are a few, I think there are a few Hebrew documents, not many. And it totally depends on what content you have. So it's entirely possible that you don't have the content that has, you know, some of those Hebrew texts. I think there's some of them within Echo. Again, if it's in Hebrew, some of the tools will work better than others. So sort of the quantitative ones, things like engrams, will work better because it's just counting the amount of times that particular words appear. The qualitative ones, like sentiment analysis, they won't work nearly as well because there won't be a sentiment mapping for kind of Hebrew words within there. So it's very much the kind of thing that I'd be interested to see what your experience is, because then that helps inform how you're using it, and then it helps inform us on how we should maybe develop the lab to make it work kind of for you. In terms of uploading Hebrew text, I don't really know because I haven't tried to do it. I've tried to do Chinese, and I've found problems with that simply because the problem is not the text itself, it's identifying where the words are. Okay, because it's kind of right to left, or it's whatever, different kind of language scheme. It's about identifying where the actual words are, and that's often the problem with kind of OCR and creating OCR for languages like Hebrew. But yeah, if you kind of sorry, I can't really answer all of it, but if you kind of if you have a play with it, maybe let me know your experiences, then that really helps me and us to be able to kind of develop the product in future to work much better with people. Gilad, yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, there's a lot there. Do have a play with it. And you've got my email, or, you will have an email from me, so you have my email. I'd be thoroughly interested to know your thoughts, what you think about it, and how you find it, because I would say one thing is very clear: it's not a finished article. This isn't a tool that we would say is perfect. We know it isn't. We're constantly developing it, and we can only develop that by knowing how people use it, and the challenges that people find, and the ways that people find that it works, and then we can kind of develop it from there. So I'd love to hear from you. But thank you for coming. Any other questions from anyone else? Oh, Gilad, I really hope it does. Let me know if it does. I'll put your quote on a poster. Any other questions before I say goodbye and stop the recording? I may stop the recording now anyway. There we go. No?